people at home and around the world. I'm here with none other than Jerad Marantz, a man who needs no introduction at this point. He's been a figure in the business of creeping people out for a long time. I spent some time in your class here at the Noman School of Visual Effects. You've been doing this for a long time. Thanks for sitting with me.
Yeah. Oh, dude, you're welcome.
Yeah, it's a long time coming, so I'm honored to have you.
Yeah.
I feel like a kid in a candy store. I've had all of these people sit with me, and I get to pick and prod at their brains. And
yeah, no, it's incredible, dude. Did you audit my class, or?
I do all kinds of things. I think it was just auditing, and I think there was a time when I was actually in it, and then the scheduling didn't work out, and I
you were still there.
I was still there.
Yeah.
At my time in Pixelogic, I was able to take a class, so I decided to take yours. But sometimes we get busy with production and stuff.
Of course.
And during those days, I'd have to sort of say, well, I can't really focus too much on school.
Yeah.
So.
How long ago was that when you were in my class?
Oh man, a couple of years. Before you had adopted ZBrush into the pipeline in such a strong way. Actually, it was it was more really drawing based, which I really loved. Actually, it was my first love as well. To hear you talk about that at 4 years old.
The funny thing is it took me a while to adopt ZBrush into my pipeline, and when it comes to design at Noman, I really only teach 2D. I do a ZBrush demo. But I feel like Noman has some incredible teachers that actually know the program a bit better than me, so I thought I'd just stick with strictly design and 2D.
Well, I think that's very humble of you, but I mean, we're sitting here, you can see all of the resources behind us. This is a place, the Mecca for learning when it comes to what we're doing. But I think you've mentioned in your class before, I think it's worth noting again, that you said you would be doing a disservice to the students if you didn't show them at least the beginnings of the underpinnings of how ZBrush could be incorporated. I remember that. That's almost a quote, by the way.
Yeah, that is actually, yeah.
So
No, it's funny. So I've been teaching for, I think it's been about 7 years. And when I started teaching, no 3D whatsoever. And then I slowly adopted it into my own pipeline. And then a couple of years back, I realized that if I didn't give the students an introduction, I wasn't preparing them for what the industry was and will be. And when they get out, it's going to be even more 3D dominant. And ZBrush is becoming a solid design tool, even at the early sketch phase.
In the beginning, almost we've heard about this. I don't want to get too far off into ZBrush because I want to know more about, I want the people to know I know about you, but I want more of the world to know about you as a young man and how this all began. Let's rewind for a moment and we'll come back to ZBrush. We have to pull back on the reins. It's coming fresh off of the main stage from a great presentation again. You were really on fire there for a minute. I wanted to let you go longer, but unfortunately we have the time frames.
Yeah, usually I'm lecturing for about 3 hours.
I know, and that's the benefit of having a Noman class to 3 hours long, and you get to see this whole process unfold. But you're considered someone who was at the when you first started, you were a very young guy in a business that was being dominated sort of by older gentlemen in a way, makeup and special effects.
Well, in all fairness, everyone was older than me. But I started at, I was about 14, and I was working for interning at a practical effects house called Soda Effects. I had taken a sculpting class when I was a kid, about 13 years old, at a school called Associates in Art. Wow. That really isn't around anymore. Have you heard of it?
I've in your biography and such, I've seen that before, but I mean...
Well, it was the first of its kind. It was a school taught by industry professionals, and I had gotten to a point where, I couldn't do the, crafty art classes when I was a kid. I was actually very fortunate to be so supported by my parents. But
I'll say,
yeah, that's
more on
definitely
that in a minute.
Luck. Yeah. But I was working. I was in this sculpting class, and I got close with the teacher, and he decided to grant me an internship at a practical effects house, and that pretty much changed everything. I mean, I was convinced that I wanted to specifically do practical effects work, which is traditional sculpture, making molds, running foam, stuff like that. I learned a lot there, and primarily I learned that above everything I cared about design, and so from that point I ended up focusing more on illustration, drawing, and painting, but I was sculpting for about 10 years before I made that choice, and then I went to Art Center, and then from that point I started working over at Stan Winston's briefly, and then freelancing from studio to studio, primarily working 2D. Then, of course, ZBrush hits, and all that prior knowledge of traditional sculpture got back into my pipeline.
To bring that back and infuse it in there. It's been in there percolating, perhaps.
Processing. Because that's what happens. You get older, and you, in the back of your brain, you know how you could have done things better. And so when the program came out, it was wonderful. Everything that I couldn't do in the program, I could compensate with my knowledge of traditional painting, just working in Photoshop. And then slowly I ended up resolving my designs more and more and more in 3D, less in Photoshop, less with paint. Didn't have to correct it as much.
It's an interesting trajectory to be there at the beginning of these things. But it's important to note as well that you're a byproduct of the Southern California scene.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're a child of that sort of space. This
Yeah.
is a tremendous advantage. I mean, I'm originally from Toronto, which is, sure, it's Hollywood North.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of the access to some of these things that you had at that tender age of 13 or 14, those are not really sort of things that most 13 or 14-year-olds are going to have access to.
Yeah.
Being here in the sort of center of it all, I think, would you say that that's fundamentally what's contributed to your career trajectory?
Definitely. You know, it's really funny. I was having this conversation recently, and every artist goes through a point where I think they resent it when people refer to what they do as like, oh, you're so lucky. Right. Because the first thing that they think of is all of the countless hours.
The pain.
Yeah, exactly.
What luck.
But then I came to this point, especially after teaching at Noman and seeing all of these students coming from really all over the world just to be here. It was like, oh yeah, I am pretty damn lucky because I was born in the Valley. Right. My parents supported me. I lived 10 minutes away from most major practical effects houses. And, there are a lot of people that don't take full advantage of the lottery of life that they have, and I realized that fortunately I did. But yeah, that's incredibly lucky.
I mean, to be here in sort of, I joked earlier, I call it the birth canal of cool, but it is actually the birth canal of cool. It's like all these things are being fostered and born out of this.
Yeah.
It's safe to say that then, but your true passions, I think, lie, if I can say so freely, in illustration and comic books. I've heard you say this before. We've spoken about this as well. Your initial sort of thrust into the world of this type of, or the ether of this world, is that you wanted to be a comic books illustrator. Is that fair to say? I mean,
I think a lot of concept artists are first exposed to comic books, and comic books are just readily available. Because I wanted to do this so early on, I think. We only had a few books at Barnes & Noble, We had Brahm, we had Wayne Barlow, we had Giger. There really weren't concept art books out there. And so comics was it. And it was readily available. It was super cheap. And I would spend my weekends in comic book shops, just getting inspired. Because also, these weren't, they're major publishers, but people could take risks in comics, in anime, in all of these really exciting magazines. And
a strange thing, though, to juxtapose that against your experience. Not to interject, but I have to say this: you were here inside the eye of the storm when it came to practical effects houses. But then, if you think about comic books, this was happening on the other side in New York. What a sort of faraway place Marvel was at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you think, I'm going to mail this thing in, and there was a time.
Yeah.
In the back
Marvel,
of it,
DC,
there was a time when you could write in sort of and apply to go draw with some of the greatest illustrators in America. I have some back issues where I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Think about that for a minute. It's like, oh geez, what's his face? I can't remember his name right now. It's like, I should be ashamed of myself. You could send in on the back of the comic book. You'd send in sort of your name and such, and you could apply to go draw with some of the best illustrators in American culture. It was like,
that's awesome.
I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about on the back of the Marvel comics.
I know there were a lot of things that you could get in the back of comics. I don't think I should have paid more attention because I thought it was just like X-ray glasses and stuff like that. I didn't realize I could actually draw with talented people.
Yeah, well, I'll show you that next time.
Yeah, that's cool.
What are some of the earliest comics you were looking at in those days?
Oh, wow. Well, I always naturally gravitated towards horror. And so the first comics I actually read were EC comics. So it was Vault of Horror, Haunt of Fear, and of course Tales from the Crypt.
Right.
And the TV show totally got me into it too, because what I loved was I'd collect these comic books and then I'd see the film version of it, back in the day. And of course I love the Twilight Zone and all of those short contained stories. They're just phenomenal. And so EC Comics started it, and then of course I ended up going to the superheroes. But it always started with Batman because of the animated series.
Right.
And the animated series was everything to me when I was a kid. I absolutely loved it. And being able to work on the films, being able to work on the suit, and everything was an
treat,
absolute
right?
dream come true. Oh, yeah, definitely. Very weird, but...
Almost surreal, probably, in some sense.
it's still surreal. Yeah,
it's like, whoa, wait a minute,
it's
I
very
wasn't-
odd to in a small way contribute to that world. Is really exciting. But yeah, the Batman animated series really got me. And of course, you go from comics to animation. It's just moving drawings, and those were the things that really excited me as a kid.
I think that's a theme that runs deep also in Toronto. Growing up there, there's a big sort of animation contingent. And
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, animation's sort of a big deal there. And,
Yeah.
And I also remember, for my own sort of purposes, that Vincent Price was like this barometer. Do you ever have that hilarious House of Frightenstein? You ever see that?
Oh, I don't know if I
It
see
was
that.
like
I
this-
saw a ton of Vincent Price when I was a
Yeah,
kid.
Billy Van and like Vincent Price, who I came to find was a friend of my real estate agent.
Oh, really?
It was really weird. It's like, oh, my parents were friends with him.
I
was
saw
like, "What?"
tons of his Edgar Allan Poe
Yeah.
pieces.
He would read these things at the beginning of this creepy program when I was a kid, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's what I'd say to my mom. I'd say, I want to be creepy like that guy. And she, I don't, she probably thought, what is wrong with this guy?
That's a good goal.
Yeah, right. So I think
Yeah,
I've landed
yeah.
pretty well. I mean, here we are
Yeah.
discussing this, so
Yeah.
it's not so far
Making
off.
monsters and
Right,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Further to the point, I want to talk about the teaching. For people who don't know at home, you have had a turnstile of students come through here over the past.
Oh, yeah.
What is it now? You said 7 to 10 years.
7. 7.
7
I
years
think 7.
of teaching
Yeah.
is
Maybe 8.
insurmountable number of students have come through
Yeah.
and have been influenced by you. I'd like to say that at some points, if you look closely, you can see the mark of Jared's teaching.
Yeah, there are a lot of
There's a-
backwards legs and
Yeah, there's-
teethy creatures out there. Yeah.
How does it make you feel as a sort of coming into now as sort of your more experienced years as a teacher? I'd say
It's incredibly rewarding. There's a very selfish side to teaching.
Yeah.
And one of it is that it's very rewarding to see that people that you've given information to take it and run. The funny thing about it is I've been doing it now for so long that students in my class have become coworkers.
I was going to say that
Yeah,
next.
yeah.
You took it right out of my mouth. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, you've given a lot of guys their start.
That's true.
In this business, and
It's very fulfilling. I like I said, I didn't necessarily have anybody open a door for me,
Right.
but because I was born in California, because these incredible opportunities were 10 minutes away, like I really enjoyed bringing people that were excited about design into the industry, and I was able to do it with a handful of people, and it was
some
very
of them are my
rewarding.
friends. Yeah, there's a few
Yeah.
friends of mine that come through Noman School that
Kelton Cram.
I was going to mention Kelton.
Yeah.
Hey, Kelton.
Kelton, is he here?
Probably
Oh,
watching.
camera.
Yeah. Forgot the camera
Yeah,
rolling. Hey,
that's
yes,
right.
I've done my job.
Good job.
successfully.
Yeah. Let me see. Jared Kraszewski.
Yeah, he was
friend.
here in the audience.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he was here earlier.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Francesco Corvino.
Buongiorno, bello.
Yeah, he's probably. Is
Watching
he still
somewhere.
in Canada?
He's watching from somewhere around the world. If you're watching, we're saying hello.
Yeah. Justin Fields.
Who was here also? I was
Luka
just with him.
Numenko.
There's so many. The list could go on and on.
It does.
But
Yeah.
I think
they're
it's a
quite few.
testament to you as a person. You have this green ocean theory that you've been applying. You sort of say, well, there's lots of ocean for all of us to take this thing even further and
Yeah.
expand the business.
Well, the other thing is I've noticed when working, because as I've mentioned during the demo, I have had tremendous fortune when it comes to just working with some of the most talented people in this industry.
Right.
And the one thing that the majority of them have in common is they're actually willing to share the information. They're willing to share their experience, and anytime you just look over their shoulder and you're like, hey, how'd you do that? The real great ones have no problems telling you how they did it.
That's a good point.
And that was something that I wanted to adopt, because the interesting thing about putting information out into the world is that it makes you responsible for finding a better way to do it. It pushes you towards finding that next hurdle, learning, accomplishing that next thing that changes your work. So it's really fun. In my my Noman DVD, the rock rubber whatever, I did not hold back. I pretty much showed everything that I do in my pipeline, and it actually put a fire under me. And now I want to learn more new exciting things.
Should be noted, if you don't have it, you should get it. It's the condensing of a tremendous wealth of knowledge. I think it's one to have and one to hold.
Not condensed enough. 6 hours, six and a half hours.
I
Yeah.
was trying to be nice about it.
Yeah.
It's not short.
No.
6 hours, but
No.
but hey, you're covering. I mean, what usually gets covered in, I would say, 10 weeks worth of work in some ways.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if not more.
Yeah,
I mean,
if you
that's,
include the revision process, definitely.
They're giving me the finger of death in behind the camera. Here's a whirly bird. Let's go on with future aspirations and future project, personal projects.
That's a good one. Yeah, I'm currently, I have several projects in development.
Of course.
And I got a bite recently that I'm hoping pays off for an animated series that
Cool.
I had written a while ago. And my first passion is actually creating my own properties and writing. And like a lot of concept artists, you want to get that stuff off the ground whenever you can. It's amazing working on these great projects, but eventually you want to work on something that you have just a little bit more control of. And so I've been doing a lot of writing. I have a couple of treatments and a couple of pitches
Cool.
out there, and hopefully one of those will bear fruit, and I will do that.
Much to talk about off camera.
Yeah.
On behalf of myself, Louis Tucci, and Jerad Marantz, thanks so much for spending time with us today. I appreciate it.
Oh.
We're going to take it back to the main screen stage here inside the Noman Green Screen hangar. They have got the party started outside, I'm sure. That wraps up day 2. Over to you, Paul. Let's wrap it up and take it to the streets. Thanks again.